Princess Catherine had the most traumatic year of her life, and her cancer battle was made only worse by some of the terrible abuse and mockery that she received online from some of Prince Harry and Meghan's most outspoken and unpleasant supporters. I've looked into this, the new Palace Confidential newsletter, and while Catherine was receiving treatment and going through some of her hardest times, she was also having to face this barrage of really nasty abuse and mockery online. For more royal insights, comment newsletter, and I'll send you all the details of how to sign up.
Richard Eden, you are an opportunistic parasite. You don't give a damn about Kate Middleton's health, her privacy, or her peace. What you care about is email signups, click-through rates, and monetizing her illness to push your tired tabloid trash to an equally tired audience. You're not a journalist. You're a gossip merchant who stumbled into the palace gates by clout-chasing cancer updates. And let's really talk about this latest stunt. You're pretending to be Kate's white knight, crying crocodile tears about mockery and abuse from Meghan and Harry supporters, while actively platforming and profiting from the same vitriol that drove Meghan to suicidal ideation when she was pregnant and hounded by your industry. Where were these fragile feelings while Meghan was being compared to a monkey by a BBC host? Where was your outrage when the Daily Fail was dissecting her womb and her wedding and her fucking avocados? The truth is, you don't care about online abuse unless it can be weaponized against Meghan. You're not protecting Kate. You're exploiting her. Just like you exploited Meghan. And just like you'd exploit a puff of royal perfume if it meant boosting your signups. And don't act like this abuse only comes from Meghan fans, because we've all seen the receipts. The death threats Meghan gets, the slurs, the deep fakes, the constant racist bile. And she's never gotten a single ounce of your sympathy. Not one. Why? Because you're not covering the royals? You're covering for the royals. You're not here to report facts. You're here to carry water for an institution that feeds off Meghan's dehumanization. So your moral panic can kiss my ass, and your fake compassion can suck it. You're not here to protect women. You're here to package their pain into profit. And if Kate is going through the hardest year of her life, then shame on you for using that to boost your brand. Say it with me. Richard Eden doesn't care about Kate. Richard Eden cares about Richard Eden. Period. This man isn't a journalist. He's a royal PR mouthpiece with an agenda. And you'd be a fool to think otherwise.
I completely agree with everything Notorious JTB said on this one. He hit the nail on the head. You ever notice how some people suddenly discover their conscience depending on who's in the headline? That's the part that gets me. One week we're told kindness matters, compassion matters, mental health matters, respect matters. Everybody's posting inspirational quotes and acting like they've just graduated from the School of Human Decency. Then, Meghan's name appears, and somehow half those rules get thrown out the nearest window. It's honestly one of the strangest magic tricks I've ever seen. The standards don't just bend, they do gymnastics. And regular people can spot it from a mile away, because this isn't complicated. If something is wrong when it happens to one person, it should be wrong when it happens to somebody else. Simple. That's how fairness works. But somewhere along the way, some corners of the media started operating like football fans. The rules depend on which jersey you're wearing. If it's their favorite person, everybody gets sympathy, everybody gets understanding, everybody gets grace. If it's Meghan, suddenly we're opening a courtroom. The jury has arrived, the prosecution has arrived, the verdict has already been printed, and the trial hasn't even started yet. What makes me laugh is how predictable the cycle has become. You can practically set your watch by it. Something happens, a story breaks, a narrative gets picked. Everybody rushes into position, and before long, the same talking points are flying around like they're being handed out with free coffee. Meanwhile, ordinary people are sitting there wondering why the reaction seems bigger than the actual event. Because that's the thing. Most folks aren't studying royal coverage 24 hours a day. They're looking at it from the outside. And from the outside, some of the double standards are hard to miss. You see one person getting patience, another getting punishment. One person getting understanding, another getting interrogation. And eventually, people start asking questions, not because they're trying to start an argument, because the difference is right there in front of them. The funny part is that some commentators act shocked when audiences notice. Mate, people aren't blind. They can see when the energy changes. They can see when outrage suddenly becomes fashionable. And they can definitely see when sympathy seems to have terms and conditions attached. That's why so many people continue defending Meghan. This whole debate boils down to one question that a lot of people are starting to ask out loud. Are the rules actually the same for everyone? Because from where many viewers are sitting, it sure doesn't feel like it. The moment Catherine faces online criticism, the conversation suddenly becomes bigger than royal gossip. Now we're talking about kindness, decency, respect, the dangers of public pylons. Everybody grabs a microphone and turns into a champion of compassion. Fair enough, those are important conversations. But here's where people start raising an eyebrow. Where was all that energy when Meghan was the one getting hammered day after day? That's the question that keeps coming back. And no matter how uncomfortable it makes people, it isn't going away. Because regular folks notice patterns. You don't need a journalism degree. You don't need a world correspondent badge. You just need a memory longer than 3 business days. People remember years of headlines, years of commentary, years of stories where Meghan seemed to be judged under a completely different spotlight. That's why so many supporters get frustrated when certain commentators suddenly start talking about empathy as if they invented it last Tuesday. Hold on a second. If kindness matters, it matters all the time. If public harassment is wrong, it's wrong all the time. You can't treat compassion like a seasonal sale. You can't pull it off the shelf when it's convenient and then pack it away when somebody else needs it. That's what people are reacting to. The frustration comes from seeing concern arrive quickly for one person while another seemed to spend years fighting the storm largely alone. And that's why responses like JTB strike a nerve, because they're not trying to be polite. They're not trying to smooth things over. They're basically saying, wait, before we start handing out lectures about fairness, let's check the receipts. Ouch, but you can understand why some people feel that way. After years of watching royal coverage, many viewers have become experts in spotting when the volume changes. Same issue, different person, completely different reaction. And once people see that, they can't unsee it. The funny part is that some commentators seem genuinely surprised when audiences point this out. Mate, the internet keeps screenshots forever. People remember, people compare, people connect dots. That's literally what audiences do. It's about consistency. The same standard, the same concern, the same humanity, applied equally. Not depending on who's trending, not depending on who's popular this month, not depending on which narrative happens to be selling. Because the second compassion starts picking favorites, people stop seeing it as principle. They start seeing it as strategy. And that's exactly why these conversations keep getting louder. The audience isn't just watching the royals anymore, they're watching the people covering them. And increasingly, they're asking whether everyone is being measured by the same yardstick. That's a much harder question to dodge than any headline. You know what ordinary people can't stand? Not criticism, not disagreement, not even drama. It's inconsistency. That's the thing that gets under people's skin. Because once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. One person gets sympathy, another person gets suspicion. One person gets understanding, another person gets interrogation. And somehow we're supposed to pretend those are the same thing. Come on, that's like a teacher giving one student extra credit for being late and giving another student detention for the exact same reason. The class is going to notice. And that's exactly what's happened with Meghan. A lot of people have spent years watching the coverage and asking a very simple question. Why does the reaction keep changing depending on who's involved? When Catherine faces difficult moments, the language often becomes softer, more protective, more careful. People talk about pressure, privacy, mental health, the human cost of public attention. And honestly, that's fair. Those conversations matter. But here's where supporters of Meghan start throwing their hands in the air. Because when Meghan faced intense scrutiny, those same conversations often seemed much harder to find. Suddenly the focus shifted. Now people wanted explanations, motives, blame, responsibility. The empathy meter seemed to run on a completely different battery, and regular viewers picked up on that. You don't need media training to see it, you just need common sense. The funny thing is that some commentators act shocked when audiences point this out. Mate, people remember. The internet remembers. Screenshots remember. Old headlines remember. You can't spend years telling people to ignore obvious differences and then act surprised when they start connecting the dots. That's why arguments like JTB's land so hard, because they're not really arguing about one article or one comment. They're asking about the scorecard, the whole scorecard, the entire season, not just one match. And suddenly people are being forced to compare how similar situations were discussed over time. That's when things get uncomfortable. Because consistency is easy when everyone agrees. Consistency gets tested when the person involved isn't your favorite. That's the real challenge. What makes this debate interesting is that it isn't really about royal gossip anymore. It's about fairness. It's about whether compassion comes with conditions attached. It's about whether concern is a principle or a preference. And people can tell the difference, trust me. Most of us have dealt with this in real life. We've had that boss who gives one employee endless second chances while another gets criticized for breathing incorrectly. We've had that teacher, that manager, that relative. The rules somehow change depending on who's standing in front of them.
That's why this conversation resonates, because it feels familiar. At the heart of it, many Meghan supporters aren't asking for special treatment. They're asking for equal treatment. Same standard, same measuring stick, same level of humanity. That's all. And once people start questioning whether those standards have been applied evenly, the conversation gets a lot bigger than one headline, one commentator, or one royal story. Because now people aren't just looking at the subjects being covered. They're looking at the people doing the covering. And that's where the real discomfort begins. Not when the facts are challenged, when the consistency is. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of the royal drama, media madness, and internet meltdowns coming your way. I've been your host, Miles, and honestly, if some commentators spent half as much time minding their own business as they spent talking about Meghan, we'd probably have world peace by now. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and trust me, some of you are funnier than the headlines themselves. Until next time, stay safe, stay fabulous, keep your tea hot and your receipts hotter. I'm Miles, and I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.